The Gates of Slumber is the sixth full-length album from the Gates of Slumber, an Indianapolis, Indiana-based traditional doom metal band who started out in an era where bands like Electric Wizard and whatnot were emerging with more of a sludge-heavy sound, and traditional doom metal was catching on as well with groups like Reverend Bizarre. They fit in really well with that trio of like Electric Wizard and High on Fire, as well as other groups of the time treating traditional doom metal with a heavier, more modern sound. And in that sense, they were kind of a legendary kind of underground band to start out. Their first couple of records caught on pretty quick on smaller labels, and they kind of built up with bigger record deals over time, eventually landing on Metal Blade in the late 2000s or so. Their work went from something that was a little bit more psychedelic and maybe classic Maryland doom influenced in general, and then worked in more heavier, sludgier, traditional heavy metal style feeling. And so there was something that was always special about the knack that they had. As different members came and went, and tragedy eventually struck here and there, they kind of had worked in something I would approximate between Hour of 13, Cathedral, and maybe a little bit of St. Vitus in there for good measure. You could tell what they liked, and you could tell how they were expressing it in their own way, and they've always been kind of a staple in the United States in the modern sense, doom metal. Now, they haven't been around for quite some time. In 2011, they put out The Wretch, and it was something that was a little bit different for the band. It was a little bit more dire, and I think if you're a fan of like Die Healing era St. Vitus, which was a lot more slow paced and intense and emotional in its delivery, there was something special about The Wretch and the way they reined in some of the free movement that had come into their sound. They split up in 2014, and they put out some other records and other versions of the band, and eventually they reformed. They brought in folks that were past members who are also active in Apostle of Solitude. And we have this new record from the band, which is short. It's surprisingly short and succinct. And it comes off of one of the best Apostle of Solitude records ever with Until the Darkness Goes. And so for me, the hype level couldn't be higher in the sense that we're regaining the voice of the Gates of Slumber in a much more straightforward way, in a very traditional manner, which is just honest and straightforward as possible, with just class performances throughout by all three members. So it's a different thing. It's a new thing in some sense, but we're getting everything you'd want out of this band, and most of what you'd expect. I'll talk more about that in a moment. For now, we'll get to one of the singles and go from there.
False dilemma, plague slow minds, truth ring.
So this is very much a pandemic record in the sense that they started writing it before the pandemic hit, and they finished it a little bit after they were able to come together and write these songs and flesh them out in the full record. So they did what they could to put together a full album, but there certainly was a hiccup in the middle of it that allowed the subject to change, some of the mood of the record, find its adversity and address it. And that means that the lyrics are very well worked over. They're very potent in every song here, and we get kind of a very, what I would consider a very distilled and high level of tincture here in terms of the Gates of Slumber being pulled down to its elements. There's a little bit of trouble in some of these songs. There's a little bit of that Lee Dorian kind of feeling to some of the movements. There's St. Vitus in there too. A lot of classic feeling to this record, and there aren't a lot of songs on here, so they touch upon all the hallmarks you'd want. There's some of that stonier doom feeling. There's psychedelic doom in there, and then there's the Maryland style there as well, which kind of has all of those things in there at once. So if you're a fan and an enthusiast of traditional doom metal, and you particularly like the United States style of it, you really get that here, and it has that stark intensity in some of these moments that you'd want from, like, the first Penance record, or again the late 90s St. Vitus sound on Die Healing. So there's a lot of my favorite things are in this record, and I think that what's going to be tough for fans returning to the Gates of Slumber is that you probably like all those things, but this doesn't necessarily have everything you'd expect from the band as a follow-up to The Wretch. This is a very different thing, and it's maybe closer to where they started, but it doesn't necessarily take into account their full evolution so much as where they are now and how they are as a new trio. So it's a new body, but it's the same brain essentially. There's maybe closer attention to detail in terms of melodies and how they play out. A lot of great harmonies are happening on this record. There's kind of a dual vocal performance here that works out really well. There's a lot to love about this record. It's kind of short. It's surprisingly short. The album artwork is incredibly simple. And so I wanted to put more of an emphasis on how much I liked this, but it feels like an EP. It feels like they're reintroducing themselves tentatively. It's a toe dipped in the water until you get to the songs and start to appreciate what they're doing here. So yeah, I mean, there are luxuries I would like here, like better album art that isn't just a logo and whatnot. But I get what they're saying here. This is a very direct statement. We're the Gates of Slumber, and this is it, and we're just going to cut right to the songs and what matters. And I think a lot of people will appreciate that once they've sat with it and maybe seen the band live. If they get out there, it's a good thing for traditional doom metal for this band to be out there and doing their thing. And I can't so wait to see what they do next and where they end up going with it, because I think this is a meaningful return and one that is worth expanding upon in the future if they keep this tightly written style and work with it more. So for me, it's a high recommendation. It would be a very high recommendation if not for a couple of things. You'll still see this on my end of the year list. It's just I couldn't help but point out the things that just weren't exactly up to what my expectations were, as well as just the general standard of presentation that I've come to expect from the band and all that. So keep that in mind, but focus on the songs. I think that's the thing that matters here most. That released on November 29th. Go ahead and read my review for more of my thoughts and check it out yourself.